Hello, I am Binita Jaiswal. I am a reporter with the New Indian Express and you are watching edX Live. Today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Jamie Betton. He is the CEO and co-founder of Crimson Education. His company has helped thousands of students from across the globe to get into their dream universities. Thank you for being with us, Jamie.
My pleasure.
So, Jamie, you started Crimson very early. So, what made you start the journey?
From a young age, I've always loved education. And actually, growing up in New Zealand, very few of my classmates were interested in going to, for example, Ivy League schools. There wasn't really a culture of it. When I was 14, I met a mentor called Ben Kornfeld, who gained admission to Yale. And his story really inspired me to believe that maybe I could have that opportunity as well. So going through high school, I spent a lot of time on my academics, extracurriculars, leadership, essays, all the various pieces. And I applied to a wide range of schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Columbia, Wharton, Cambridge. When I checked my results and I gained admission to all these schools, it was super exciting. But also, I had so many students reaching out to me to ask if I could guide them as well. And so Crimson began as a give-back project to help my fellow New Zealand students gain admission to these top universities. And I never looked back since.
So, Jamie, do you think in current scenario, when we have post-COVID scenario and this changes in immigration laws, do you think where is this international education heading to?
So there's still voracious demand for these top US and UK schools because if you want to work at a global investment firm like a Blackstone or a Goldman Sachs, or you want to become an entrepreneur and raise millions in Silicon Valley funding, like my students at Mayo Young Fund, these universities are still the best way for you to be able to break into those top tier industries. And so I'm seeing actually the strongest demand for those top schools of all time. The immigration rules tend to have big effects on lower ranked colleges, which tend to be more tied to visa and immigration than career outcomes. But the top school demand has really been very strong for the last 10 years. And many of the Ivy League schools have seen their acceptance rates actually decline by more than half since we began Crimson.
So in current context, we see there is a lot of talk about AI. So do you see AI and automation having an impact or changing the way the students are preparing for elite colleges admissions?
Certainly, a lot of my students create entrepreneurial projects as they prepare for top schools like Stanford. Students might build things like websites or apps or nonprofits. And many of these generative AI tools enable them to build those things far faster than ever before. What this means is the real-world impact is more important than ever before. An example would be my student Artie. He gained admission to Yale, Stanford, and Wharton, and he created a podcast called The Economics Review, where he interviewed over 120 economics faculty around the world. Someone like Artie can use generative AI tools to help him with developing scripts for interviews, helping him generate emails to outreach to faculty around the world, but ultimately his real-world impact is what the universities will assess him based on. So I would say generative AI is very, very much changing these capstone projects. Also, it enables students to get better academic success because you can actually use generative AI as a kind of tutor, at least for certain kinds of questions as well. So I would say when used responsibly and ethically, generative AI can be quite a powerful tool for students for their growth. And it's also very powerful for lower income students because they can actually access mini tutors. They're not quite as good as elite tutors, but they certainly provide some value for kind of core questions a student might have.
And do you think in current scenario, the students from Indian or South Asian countries are opting countries like UK, Canada, or even Singapore for that matter, over US these days?
So the top schools, I would say the Ivy League schools, the top 40 US schools, and the top 10 UK schools are very robust in terms of their demand. What we do see is as immigration rules change in countries like Canada, Australia, and the UK, the volume into some of the lower ranked schools tends to gyrate around quite dramatically. With some of also the recent, Trump election hysteria, people are also thinking about applying to more countries as well. But in general, the US is still the first choice of my students around the world. And certainly, it's quite interesting. I visited Eton, the top school in the UK, about 8 years ago. When I visited it, I would say the top students there regarded the US schools as almost like a second-class citizen. When I went back late last year, the top 15 academic boys, called the King Scholars, 14 of them had the US as their top choice school. So I would say the top US schools are actually rising, more so than they ever have before. And so I would say it's a tale of two worlds between those top universities and everything else.
Okay. So Jamie, one global trend, education trend that no one is talking about, but they should. What do you think?
Well, a major trend is there's actually an arms race going on between the universities when it comes to financial aid. What I mean by this is Harvard recently announced that if you earn less than $200,000 US, which is most of the world, tuition is free to go to Harvard, which is a major breakthrough. And other schools like MIT have announced similar competing policies. All of this is actually amazing for a candidate because it means that if you're a student applying in India or applying from, for example, Australia, and you can gain admission to these top schools, there's a very high chance you can actually afford it because of these massive scholarships that are taking place. So even 20 years ago, the assumption was these Ivy League schools were very expensive and they could only be attended by sort of elite business families. But now the financial aid has really brought down who can actually get in, who can afford to go, which changes the landscape dramatically. It actually increases competition, but it means that students from lower income families have the potential to gain admission. And I see that all over the world, from smaller villages in India, all the way to, for example, Maori students from our home country in New Zealand, like Jared or Sam Taylor, who recently gained admission to Harvard with their full tuition covered by the university.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie.